Hi there, I'm Donna Edgar, Director of Sental Recruitment, and thank you for joining us today. We've put together this short presentation in partnership with the Hull College Group because we know that many of you are struggling with how you target the job market yourselves. Now, the principles that we'll go over today will be the same if you're a student totally new to the job market or if you're a manager looking for your next role. We'll talk through CVs and we'll look at a standard CV template that agencies use up and down the country. We'll also talk through covering letters, how to get the best from those, look at some interview tips as well as some additional points and things that you can do to help you get that job. So first thing we'll do, then we'll jump straight in with the CV. And when you're putting together your CV, you need to think of it like a newspaper article. It needs to be interesting from start to finish. So if the manager's having to read right down to here before they're seeing something of interest, chances are they've put your CV down and picked another one up in its place. You also don't want big paragraphs in your CV. If it's wordy and paragraph after paragraph, it just feels heavy, and the manager will want to put the CV down and pick up something that's laid out a little bit better. You should ideally have a CV that's 2 to 3 pages long. Now, if you are new to the job market, that doesn't mean put big margins and big gaps in between the text, etc. 1 page is absolutely fine. It just shouldn't go more than 3 pages. You should ideally have 2 to 3 versions of your CV. So myself, for example, I could have a HR CV, I could have a recruitment CV, an admin CV, etc. A student totally new to the job market might have a CV focused on where they want to take their chosen career. They could maybe have an admin CV because everything you're doing on research projects, etc. is all related to admin work. You can maybe have a customer service CV that you want to use for telesales jobs, bar work, retail jobs, etc. So you should be able to come up with a good few variants from that. Remember, your CV is you right now, and you are the product. If you don't get this right, you won't get the interview. And once you've got the interview, you're halfway there. So really put everything you can into preparing that correctly. So let's look at a sample CV then. The first thing you need to have on your CV is your contact details. It sounds so obvious, you'll be surprised how many people forget to put those contact details on, or they will actually make a mistake with the telephone number and transpose digits, etc. I would also say put a LinkedIn profile on there. If you're not familiar with LinkedIn, it's kind of a business version of Facebook, so businesses use it nowadays to check out who the candidate is. People can put referrals on there, recommendations, etc. You can put your CV on there, and a lot of agencies and companies will actually use that as a way of sourcing candidates for jobs. You then need to make sure you've got your key achievements on here. So bullet point them, make them specific, and about 5 to 7 bullet points is absolutely fine. You need to keep them around saving time, saving money, or making money. Now, you might be a procurement manager sat there thinking, well, I can evidence that I save money all the time. That's my job. And a sales manager might think, well, I make money all the time. That's my job, to go out there and hit those targets. But an admin person might think, well, I don't really do any of those things. Chances are you do. You maybe have put together a different filing system that's helped the business to work more proactively, or even a student that's used to analysing data or researching projects, etc. Those things are all beneficial to a business. And give examples of the levels of management that you've worked at in the past. So if you have managed a team of 5 sales ledger clerks, etc., mention it, be specific with the numbers, the types of staff, etc. So this CV is more related to someone with experience, and the profile we've given you here is a versatile and efficient accountant with extensive experience of the manufacturing industry. Again, just a couple of lines about a profile is absolutely fine. Normally what a manager will do when they pick up any CV is they'll look at the key achievements, they'll then go straight down to look at the employment history, and they'll maybe go back to the profile at the end if they've liked what they've seen. So don't try and put it all into the profile. You then need to get your dates of employment. If it looks like you've had a lot of movement on your CV, it's a real big no-no to job hop. People who move around every year, it really is frowned upon by agencies and by employers. So if there has been good reason for moving on, if you've maybe been made redundant, or maybe you've done a lot of contract work in the past, just put it in brackets next to the dates why you've had to move on, and it just explains that to the business. Put the company name and also the position that you worked in. Now, when you do put the position on there, a lot of businesses will call job titles something weird and wonderful that means a lot to them, but not really anything to the wider market. So I would always say, if you're known as something particular at that company, but it's known as something else, put that maybe in brackets or put slash so that someone knows what else it is, etc. Myself, for example, when I was about 18, I was a systems administrator for a company, which was absolutely fantastic. I thought it was a great title to have at that age, but I kept getting calls about IT jobs and things, and that's not what I was. I was an admin person at the end of the day. I would have been so much better just having administrator as my job title. You would then go on and add a couple of lines about the company. So to give you an example here, Made Up Company Limited are a global steel manufacturer that make products for the construction industry. Straight away then, anyone that's reading what type of company you've worked for would know what type of companies you can work for, maybe the supply chain around those industries as well, and what kind of level you're used to working at in those global businesses or smaller companies, etc. You then add some key bullet points to demonstrate your experience, and again, make them meaty and to the point. And again, 5 to 7 bullet points, absolutely fine. Key achievements, give a couple of key achievements of things that you've done in those companies. If there's any gaps in your CV, if you've maybe had some time out to raise a family, mention it. We've all done it. I've had time out to raise a family and raise my 2 children, etc. But a gap in the CV raises a lot more question marks than just saying you've had that time off. Then go on to the next company, etc. So you're moving backwards in your career history from there. You would then add on any relevant qualifications that you had. Once you've got about 5 years experience behind you, you don't really need to worry about your school qualifications anymore, unless you did fantastic at school and you really want to sing about that, that's no problem at all. But most people, after about 5 years, you can start to drop them off. Systems used, Excel, Word, etc. Things like Excel spreadsheet, graphs, pivot tables, manipulating data, they're all things that are used quite often in study, but people don't think to tell an employer that they've got those kind of skills. So I would say definitely address those. And any other information, for example, that you've got a full clean driving licence and a car, it makes you more flexible to how you can get to different jobs, opens up different types of work for you, etc., makes you more reliable as a candidate. And hobbies and interests. This just makes you a person rather than a piece of paper. I would say be careful with the hobbies though. You don't want to be putting that you're an avid Manchester United fan, for example, when a Liverpool supporter might be reading that. Believe me, I've seen people's CVs go down for less than that. Don't mention politics, don't mention football teams you support, etc. There's nothing wrong with saying that you're an avid sports fan, but try not to be too specific on the teams, etc. So a CV then for a student would be laid out in exactly the same kind of way. Key achievements and skills. I've given you a few examples of what I think you could put on here. You could maybe say you've got a 2-1 microbiology degree if that's your chosen path in where you're taking your career. Again, another example of that type of candidate would be extensive lab experience, running microbiology tests, worked in various lab-based research projects, etc. So again, you're kind of putting the meat on the bones as to what you've done in those types of jobs. The profile about you, again, as an example profile will be versatile and capable microbiology graduate, seeking to expand my experience within the pharmaceutical industry. Qualifications you would put at this point in a CV when you are a school leaver or a graduate, etc., because that's your most of your experience. You then go into study projects, so in a way this is kind of your employment history, this is the things you've done. You'd put your project heading on there, you'd give them details about key bullet points, about what you've covered in those types of study projects, etc. And again, about 5 to 7 good bullet points about things that you've covered. You then move on to the next project, etc., to give them a few good examples. If you've maybe had some employment history whilst you've been studying, maybe you've had some part-time bar work or worked in an office or done some voluntary work, internships, etc., mention those onto the CV as well. There's nothing wrong with putting in brackets that it was part-time during study. Again, bullet point your experience, etc. And then you'd go on to the usual things that we've mentioned in the previous one about systems used, etc. So questions often asked then. Whenever we're talking to candidates about the job market, they always have some weird and wonderful questions for us. And the most popular ones are, I've got too much experience to fit on a 3-page CV. I think the easiest thing that I can say to that is I had a coffee a few days ago with an international director of a global business and his CV was 2 pages long. I think if he can do it, we can do it. It's just a matter of being more careful with what you're getting in there. Some agencies do recommend that you actually cut anything after 10 years worth of experience. I don't really like to do that. I think you don't need to put all of the text behind it, but at least be putting the position, company and the details of what you did, even if it's just one-liners for each of those businesses as it goes further back. Again, if those types of companies though were more relevant to what you're looking for now, again, maybe you need to expand that further and reduce your latest things if they're not so relevant to that job that you're going for. Should my photo be on my CV? I love this one. I hear it all the time. I would say absolutely not. For every one person that likes a photo on the CV, you've probably got another 10 that don't. And I think even if you look like Brad Pitt and you have a very nice photo on that CV, you're still potentially going to find someone that doesn't like that photo and doesn't like Brad Pitt, and it potentially is a reason to put your CV down and pick another one up. Will I be considered overqualified for a specific role? Absolutely. Happens all the time. I think the best thing you can do there is maybe just downplay some of your experience. It's not dumbing down your CV as such, but it is kind of showing that you're able to work at different levels. So maybe if you've been a director in the past, you might want to say that you've been a manager instead of a director if you are going for a management role, because directors don't always like to be managed by other people. School leavers and students often put that they've done, when they've started their own business, that they've been a director. Again, fantastic that you've done that, but maybe better to word it as a manager. Again, it just shows that you're capable of doing the job, but also that you're willing to be managed. How can I get experience in my desired industry? So if you are a student totally new to the market, or if you are someone with experience but wanting to change industry, I think the best thing to do to get you that experience is to offer to volunteer. Yeah, say to a company you're prepared to do 2 weeks, a month, voluntary work with them so you can gain some experience, you'll get a reference from them, you'll be able to put it on your CV. You don't have to say that it was voluntary on your CV, you could put that it was a contract, and you can explain in the interview that you volunteered with that business. But again, it just opens it up and gives you more options moving forward. So what you need to do next then, you need to review your CV, look at it from what we've talked about, make those amendments, blow your own trumpet, go home, sit there with your partner or your brother or your friend, give them a pad and pen and make them a cup of tea and just say to them, look, for the next 20 minutes, I want to sing my praise about things that I've done in work or things that I've done at college, etc. Get them to make lots and lots of notes while you're chatting away, and then they'll pass it back to you. There's bound to be a couple of really good things in there that you want to put into your CV. Put together 2 or 3 versions of your CV and check it again. You'll maybe get away with 1 mistake in a CV, but you absolutely won't get away with 2, so make sure that that's as good as it possibly can be. Covering letters then. So a covering letter, the sample that we've given you, again, it's got your contact details, it's got the business contact details on there. We've put about saying it's private and confidential. So if it's going to someone in the post, if you know the person's name, mark it private and confidential. That just then makes sure that it's viewed by that person direct, unless they're a director or senior management and they've got a PA, because PAs would always open people's letters. Again, on this example, so this is for someone with experience applying for a specific job. They've wrote accountant because that's the type of job they're looking for. Please find attached a copy of my up-to-date CV for your consideration with regards to the above-mentioned position. So they've opened up that letter in a very nice, friendly way. As you will see, I have extensive experience of accounts management from my time working as a manufacturing accountant with Made Up Company Limited. I've also worked specifically on project-related accounts, which I know is another key requirement for the role, and thus feel that it would be an excellent match for this position. I would very much appreciate the opportunity of meeting with yourselves to discuss the possibility of my joining your company in more detail, and I am available for immediate interview if required. So the letter actually has everything that the person will be looking for. It opens nicely, it gives them a short paragraph about why they're sending the letter and why they're relevant, and then it closes in a very friendly manner. You would always put sincerely or faithfully on a letter, so it's sincerely if you know who you're addressing it to, it's faithfully if it's dear sir, madam. Let's look at an example then for someone to send the CV on spec. So this one we've done it is for the lab graduate that we've been looking at for this one. So they've put as their subject heading microbiology, lab-related roles. I know from my experience as a recent science graduate that another made-up company limited have an excellent reputation of manufacturing pharmaceutical products. Having just graduated with 2-1 in microbiology, I am now actively seeking employment within your industry, and another made-up company limited are definitely a key target employer for me. You are much more likely to get an interview from a spec letter if you've made it specific to that company. They then don't feel like you've just sent it out generally to 100 different companies with exactly the same covering letter. They feel like it's been made more personal to them. So again, you would close the letter in exactly the same type of way, keeping it friendly, telling them that you're willing to explore options. You may even want to mention in this that you're prepared to do voluntary work, etc. with them to gain that experience. But as I say, the covering letter is a really good way to say what you need to say, but you can't rely on it. So we'll talk about that more in a second. You need to put together a couple of draft covering letters. So you want to have one that's for a job that you're applying to, and also for one that's where you just send your CV on spec to a business. I would always say if you do send your CV on spec to a company, follow it up a few days later. Who did the letter go to? What did they think? Was there any chance of an interview, etc.? And it might be that there's nothing now, but they may say, look, call us back in a few months. We might have something by then, etc. And it's just something for you to diarise for the future. Don't rely on the covering letter. So this is a very, very important part. What we've said there about the covering letters is fantastic. You need to have them, but first thing a manager will do when they get your CV is go like this. They will flick the covering letter over and go straight on to reading about your CV. If the information isn't in the CV, chances are they'll never flick back and look at that covering letter. So you really need to make sure that the key achievements are in there. It's all specific to the job that you're applying to, etc. And the covering letter's more of the nicety that accompanies it. It's not something that you're relying on. Okay. Well, I hope you found that first part useful, and we're now going to move on to interview and additional tips that we can cover.